welcome back for another episode of the CBSI Hot 10 show. Make sure you go over to comicbookinvest.com and check out the article where I may put a few extra details and tidbits that I don't cover here on the show tonight. And while you're at it, check out all the content we do have here on the channel. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you hit that alert button so you don't miss anything, and keep telling your friends so we can keep growing this little channel. But if you want to see this week's Hot 10, just hang out for a few seconds after the intro, and I will be right back.
Notable sales.
All right, so for our notable sale this week, I saw this this B cover for Noble Causes Family Secrets #3 sell for an all-time high in a CGC 9.8. If you don't know what this book is, this is actually the first little, cover and image of Invincible. As you can see him way down there in the corner of this uncanny, homage here with the poster in the background. You can see Invincible way down there in the bottom corner if you look real closely. And like I said, this sold for an all-time high of $1,000 on a best offer. This last sold for $844 back in January of earlier this year. So just a couple of months ago, but still it is on the increase with the popularity of Invincible and the current run of season 4 of the show. So with that, this book hit an all-time high. I don't know if this is the ceiling yet. There could be some more room to grow on this. Who knows? But not an easy book to find nonetheless. So this Jim Valentino cover is one to keep an eye out for if you're out there in the wild, because, hey, you never know. With that said, let's move it on and see those couple of books that didn't quite make it. So before we get into the actual Hot 10 list, here are a couple of books that almost made the cut, but just missed it by a hair. Starting off first with this G.I. Joe book. This is the 1 in 25 foil edition of this Baroness special, this one-shot G.I. Joe Real American Hero Silent Missions, Baroness #1, 1 in 25. That is a very long title. But this 1 in 25 is very much like the silent missions we've got previously from the G.I. Joe side of things, where we've got the 5 specials, 5 one-shots, 5 variants spelling out G.I. Joe. This time they're spelling out Cobra for the Cobra side of things. I mean, you had to expect it was coming, right? So here we go with the first issue of the 5 of these 5 minis coming or 5 one-shots, I should say, coming our way, with the first one being Baroness with the letter C. And again, it's a 1 in 25. It's a foil edition. And the only reason it didn't make it, because it is selling for a decent premium, is just volume. Limited volume on this, as I only counted 8 sales thereabouts so far. Granted, it's only been 2 days since it's been on the market, but only 8 sold. It is averaging $61 already, with highs already hitting 75. This happened with a couple of the G.I. Joe foils. Not all of them, but a couple of them did kind of hit these marks, but maybe not this quickly. So it is Baroness after all, but keep this in mind, and we'll see what happens if more volume and more issues come to the market in the days ahead. So just missed the cut this week with only 8 sales. A couple more. I had it actually in the list for a minute, and then I pulled it out and replaced it with another book, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But first, let's get to the other book that missed the cut, and that is Daredevil. Daredevil, we got the blind bags this week. Love them or hate them, blind bags are still here and a part of our marketplace. Now, these blind bags are directly from Marvel, True Believers blind bags, and inside you can get a variation of any of the regular edition books. And these blind bags cost cover price, which is what, $5.99. So you're not paying a premium to take a shot and see what you get. Yes, it is scratching that gambler mentality, kind of, the little scratch off feeling that many people have in wanting to play this game. But there are a couple of variants you can get inside these bags that you can't get anywhere else. 3, in fact, among other special sketch editions, which are randomly inserted, etc. But outside of that, any of the other open order, and I think even the ratio books could be in here. But there are 3 specific covers that you can only get inside this blind bag. And one of them is already doing very well, but price-wise, not yet volume. But again, it's only been 2 days. I don't know how many bags have been opened or how many people have ripped packs yet. I'm not paying attention to the live eBay auction market or whatnot, because it's Easter week. I'm kind of busy. But with that said, on eBay, as far as sales go, I did see a couple sales of this Daniel Warren Johnson Virgin version. So once again, this is one you can only get in the blind bag. There is a trade dress version that you could get, open order, but for the virgin, only way is the blind bag. And this one is selling pretty well, albeit only 3 sales so far. So 3 so far, 80 to 110 bucks are the prices. So it's a decent amount for a book that got ripped out of a $6 bag. So keep that in mind, but that's why it missed the cut. Not enough volume despite those really big prices for this variant. Again, no idea on what the print run on this thing is. Just know that it's only available in the blind bag, but there are a lot of blind bags out there. If you look at some of the high ratio incentives, which go up to 500 and 1,000. Even those are well below ratio, those high-end ratios, because there are copies out there. But with that said, before we get to the Hot 10, I want to remind you out there that you can save 10% off your entire order over at BCW by using my code RENA10. That's RENA10 for 10% off all your bags, your boards, your long boxes, your short boxes, CGC boxes, top loaders, whatever supplies you need to keep your comics or collectibles safe. You can find a product over at BCW. You can use the link below, but get there wherever you want. But if you're shopping, use my code RENA10 for 10% off your whole order. You help out the channel. You get yourself a discount. You really got nothing to lose by doing so. So with that out of the way, 10% off RENA10. Let's get into the Hot 10 with our first book.
Number 10.
I mentioned the blind bags just now, and I mentioned a book that kind of replaced that G.I. Joe book, and this is the book that replaced it. One of the other only in the blind bag editions is the the NetEase edition for the video game Rivals. So this Rivals cover seems to be the pick of choice of many already, early out of the gate after only 2 days. Not my favorite cover. I mean, it's all right. Don't get me wrong. It's a design cover and the Rivals things. It's not something we haven't seen before. Wasn't my favorite of the bunch. I like the Daniel Warren Johnson, and I like the Dan Panosian as well. It's got that classic Frank Miller feel, but none of those have sold yet. And I already told you about the virgin version of the Daniel Warren Johnson. So here is the third and final only in the blind bag edition. This is the Rivals cover, and this one had only 5 sales. I normally don't put books with this low volume on the list, but that's why I kept it here at number 10, because I couldn't ignore these prices. It's averaging $233 already with a high of $250. Lowest sale being $200. So 5 books already sold in 2 days. We have people opening up these packs, average, 5 between $200 and $250 each time. And there's a couple listed. I think there's 3 listed, all still in that same asking range. So once again, those are big numbers for a book that we don't have a print run number on. We don't know much about it apart from you can only get it by opening the blind bags. So that gambling mentality is taking over, and people are paying a hefty premium for this book, albeit only a few so far. So we'll see in the week ahead how this goes, and if more to come to market, if the price maintains, goes up, comes down, etc. We'll see that next week. But for now, like I said, I did some debating. I ended up putting this on the list, albeit at the bottom, despite the fact that it only has 5 sales. I don't normally like doing that. It's only 5 sales, but these are big sales. So with that, I felt the need to represent it at the bottom of the list. So with that out of the way, let's get into the meat of it and move on to our next book.
Number 9.
All right, falling a few spots from last week at number 9, we have the Superman Spider-Man Delato cover. Yes, this seems to be the favorite book of the group of 26 open orders, and then all the store exclusives, etc. So many cover options for this book, but of the open order ones, this seems to be the one that most collectors are picking as their favorite. This Delato cover, albeit it's falling down the list mostly because of volume. Volumes are nowhere near where they were last week, but we're not seeing much cover price movement anymore, as we've got another 50 or so sold, 50 plus sold this week, but the average has gone up a hefty 67% to $15, where last week the average was still right at cover, because this is a $9 book, mind you. But average is now up to $15 on this particular cover. Highs at $22, also up 10%, and 87% of all the copies sold for a premium price, which to me was $1 over cover. So 87% of all these sales were above $10. So keep that in mind. $9 cover, but 87% of all the sales this past week were at $10 or more. So you can see now how more of the premium prices sell last week. Early returns were showing this was trending that way, and it did continue that way in selling at a premium, albeit at a slower pace. But again, last week was the release week. So we had a lot of pre-sales and a lot of cover price and under cover price sales in there, diluting what was happening with the market. So now we've got a better gauge on where this book is. It's about 15 to 20 bucks right now. So with that, it's still number 9 because of that drop in volume from one week to the next, but still representing pretty strongly. And moving on from here, let's see what our next book is.
Number 8.
Also hanging on to the list, but slipping a spot, is this classic. An expensive classic. Everybody knows this book. This is ASM 129, First Punisher. And it feels like he's a part of the Daredevil Born Again show, but he isn't, at least not yet. Still don't know if he's showing up or not, but we do know he's coming later. He's getting his own special in May. He is coming in Brand New Day this summer with in the next Spider-Man movie. But Amazing Spider-Man 129 is still doing pretty well, despite the fact that it has slipped a spot down our list to number 8. And why did it slip? Well, it's mostly because the volume kind of remained kind of consistent to where it's been. Last week was a 2-week combination. This week is a 1 week, 25 plus sold, averaging $1,400. That's average over all sales. And we got to include graded with raws because, be honest, most of these copies are graded these days. There's more graded copies than raw copies, it feels like, selling most of the time. But we got to put it all together. 1433 is up 45 bucks. I didn't want to do a percentage because we're talking about these numbers just to give a better context. It's up $45 on average this current week, with the raw high up 430 bucks to 1684. And the big sale of the week was a 9.6 that sold for $7,500. So can't really apples to apples compare that 9.6 because there wasn't a 9.6 last week. But point is, prices, averages up still for Punisher, despite the fact that, yeah, volume's kind of level. But it's to be expected. This is a big book. It costs a lot of money. Not a lot of movement usually on something like this. Not a ton of people willing to throw $1,000 out there for a comic book on a weekly basis. And here we still have another 24 doing so. So with that, let's move on to our lucky spot here at number 7.
Number 7.
Falling down the list again is another repeat, and I believe the last on our list. No, well, we'll see. But falling down the list from the top spot from last week, we do have Monstrous number 1. And why did this fall down the list? Well, mostly, again, due to volume, because prices are up. So with 40 plus sales, which I think is about half the volume that what we saw last week, but the average price of these books are selling at an increase of 31%, as now it's averaging 55 bucks for a first print number 1, with a high hitting $105, which is a 60% jump basically from last week's high. So prices are definitely up. It's just the volume kind of slowed up. Less copies now as the market is kind of gobbling them up, I guess. But that is why this fell down the list to number 7, but stays on the list because, again, prices are increasing. Of these 40 plus sales, a quarter of them or more are graded sales, with most of them being like 9.8s, and 9.8s are hitting a high of 355 this week. I think last week it was a bit higher on the one high, but on an average, more graded sales this week than last week. So a lot of graded copies moving. And again, I told you last week about the second and third prints. I didn't see any third print sales. I think I saw a couple of second print sales, but the second print high this week is up a few bucks to $51. So also for context, keep an eye out for the second and third print. The third print being a blue trade dress version of this cover here. So looks the same as this, but slightly different. And Monstrous still doing well, despite the fact that it fell down to number 7. And with that, let's look and hopefully get a new book here in our next spot.
Number 6.
Well, those looking for a new blood kind of get your wish, because yes, we have a new book to the list, but it is an old book that has been here many, many times before. We got a Supergirl trailer last week. I thought we'd see some more movement on Women of Tomorrow, but not really much doing on that first print as far as volumes go. Still doing well price-wise, but we did see an increase for Omega Men number 3, as we got a little bit more Lobo in the trailer, a little bit more of a sense of his character and how he's going to sound, act, move, etc. Don't know how large his role is going to be, but it looks decent sized enough. If the trailer is giving him any sort of proportionate, coverage, we'll see. He could have a decent role. But Omega Men number 3 selling well this week, earning its spot here at number 6 with 35 plus sold. So almost a little about 3 dozen sold thereabouts, up 100% volume from last week to this week, averaging $210 overall. That's including graded sales and raw sales, because much like that Punisher book, a lot of these copies are graded these days. So the average is up to $210, which is a $39 increase from last week's average. Raw's high hitting $112 for context. So if you're looking for the raw version of it, raw high is about $112, where I think last week was about $100. So $12 up on the raw average. Of those 3 dozen sales, nearly half of them were CGC 9.8s. Look, 15 CGC 9.8s sold this week alone, averaging $311 across them, with the high being $379, which is a $59 jump from last week's 9.8 high. So once again, like the Monstrous book, more graded copies are selling this week than last week. So a lot of graded volume starting to move here for some of these books, which is why they're representing well here on the list. So with that, that is our number 6 book. Let's keep it rolling and see what we got next.
Number 5.
And here at number 5, we have Invincible. Invincible number 72, the Viltrumite War Conquest. I don't want to spoil this book, though, if you watch the show this week, which I haven't even watched the show yet this week, but I know what happens. This comic is adapted basically this week on the 4th season of Invincible. I'm a little behind on the 4th season, so I'm trying to catch up, but we know where this is going ultimately, because the Invincible comic has been out a while. But just so you know, they did a pretty good job, from all I gather with reviews, etc., that they did a good job adapting this book here, issue 72, to the screen on that Amazon animated show. So with that, it was selling a couple copies last week, because this is a pricey book, mind you. This is the end with Conquest here, but about a dozen sold this week is a 300% increase from last week, because like I said, there's only like 3 or 4 sales last week, and $134 is the average, which is why we don't see a lot of volume. It's a $134 book, highs hitting $160 this week. So a lot of people willing to shell out extra bucks. 3 more, 4 times as many as last week, basically, are willing to shell that out for this book, featuring this battle between Invincible and Conquest, the final battle, if you will. So with that said, that is our number 5 book, and we can keep it rolling and see what we got next.
Number 4.
Kind of piggybacking a little on this heat, but a lot of people have been picking up these Invincible month variants from last month, where it's the Invincible team-ups over at Image, where basically every Image title was getting an Invincible cover. And one of the earliest ones being this Walking Dead Deluxe number 32 by David Finch, featuring Negan and Conquest going at it. So part of it could have been the appearance this week and the battle that I mentioned on our last book on the show this past Wednesday on April Fool's Day. But this cover is moving well this week, more so than last week, to the tune of 40 plus sold, which again is a 300% increase, much like the last book on that volume, with averages now up to $15 on this one. This is a $3.99 cover, so that's a pretty decent jump, with a high of $23 for this Walking Dead 132 Deluxe Edition featuring the Invincible cover. So keep an eye on this one, as well as volumes and prices are on the uptick this week. We'll see if it continues. And with that, we'll keep it rolling to our top 3 next.
Number 3.
Here we go. Another book that actually was on the bottom of the list last week has climbed up to near the top this week to number 3. This is The 1 in 10 by Corey Walker for Capes number 5. As I understand it, we are now into new issues and new stories of Capes, as the original bit has been redone, revamped, and they moved on. So thanks. I forget who mentioned it in the comments last week, but we are on to new stories here with Capes. But this 1 in 10 incentive variant has captured the mind of collectors, with a lot of fans of cheesecake covers, and they are paying well for this cover. 50 plus sold, which is a 150% increase on last week's decent volume, averaging $44, up 47% from last week's decent prices for a 1 in 10. This is $44 for a 1 in 10 variant. Highs hitting as much as $58, which is also an increase. So a lot of green across the board for volume and price, which is why this one has climbed up the list here to number 3. Capes number 5, the 1 in 10 incentive variant. And with that, we still got 2 books left. So let's take a look and see what we are.
Number 2.
All right, I'm ready to fight about this one because this is Comics the Magazine number 2. And I know some of you out there are going to say this is not a comic book. And yes, it is more of a magazine, but it is comic book priced and comic book sized, so much in the vein of Marvel Age. Before it, I'm going to file this under a comic book like I do Marvel Age. So that's why it is qualifying for the main list, as normal magazines I kind of hold separately. But that said, pick this book up, read it if you can, because it's some quality stuff in here. At least I read the first issue so far. Haven't gotten to the second one yet because it just got released this week. But with that release, there was a secret cover also handed out, and that is this cover by Art Adams. The regular cover features Battle Beast on it and some interviews related to Battle Beast. But here is a tease for Kirkman's Terminal, which we know is coming. The Ash Can was released, not that long ago. So people picked up the Ash Can, getting teased once again here on Comics the Magazine with this secret cover. You can see it across the top. You found the secret variant. Art Adams cover. And a lot of folks have been grabbing this. 35 plus sold, so 3 dozen sales thereabout so far, averaging $20 for this $2.99 magazine book. Highs already hitting $30. So decent volumes, decent prices on one of these secret releases. I don't know the ratio on how people needed to qualify for this. It was just kind of in bundles, as I understand it, with no real warning. Secret surprise. Here we are picking it up now at a premium. So Comics the Magazine number 2 here at number 2 with that Art Adams special. And with that, we've got one book left, so let's take a look and see what it is.
And our number 1.
Surprising me that this book found its way to the top, despite the fact that I do like this cover. I like it a lot. Dead Samurai number 6 has shot itself to the top of the list this week because, let's face it, I mean, it's been an odd week with a lot of option news and option television, animated show news kind of slowing things down a bit. But Dead Samurai number 6, this Draxgal cover has just, again, captured the attention of the market, and they are paying premium prices, much like the Quintana book. So is Drax going to be the next artist that starts seeing their back issues into the lists and selling at premium prices? Possibly. But right out of the gate, this number 6 for Dead Samurai has done well. 60 plus sales already, averaging $12 for this $5.99 book. So it's already double cover easily, with highs already hitting $20. Of all the copies sold this week, again, some of them pre-sales because the book release was only Wednesday. It's only Friday, and this is 7 days worth of sales content. So some of these are pre-sales, but 40 of these sales were premium. So 2/3 basically sold above cover, or $1 more than cover. So $7 or more for this one. 2/3, 2 out of every 3 sold for more than cover price this week. With there already being CGC 9.8 pre-sales, $60 or more. Some sold at 60, some now already seeking $100 for pre-sales on 9/8 of this book. So again, I don't know how much of a surprise for people, but I liked it when I did the Wednesday watch list. I'm surprised to find it here, but it is a nice little cover if you like a nice cheesecake cover. So with that, this is our number 1 book this week. We will see what we get to next week, but for now, that is our list. But we are not done yet with the show. Before we go, in case you need shipping supplies, you can also use my Renna10 code for 10% off over at Gemini to get your Gemini mailers. They also have bags and boards and boxes if you need those supplies as well. But mostly, if you need those shipping supplies, you can save money because you hate paying money for that kind of stuff. So you might as well save a few bucks while you do it. You help out the channel, 10% off using my code RENNA10 over at Gemini Comic Supplies. And with that, you know what time it is. Let's take a look at what happened to books we saw last week that didn't quite make the cut this week. Okay, so for this week's Fallout, we don't have a lot to cover because, you saw Monstrous still hung in there, still made the list. And we're not going to discuss those books that kind of spiked due to the passing of celebrities like Chuck Norris and comic legends like Sam Keith. So obviously, sales have slowed down this week from last week. So we don't need to go into the numbers of those. But Powers, another one of those announcements, teases that we're getting an animated show for this series from Brian Michael Bendis, was pretty high up on the list. I think number 4 last week, but couldn't quite make it this week due to a drop in volume, mostly. Prices, like Monstrous, prices up, volume slowing. So with that, Powers #1 slowed quite a bit, down 2/3. So it's down 67% with under 20 sales this week. But the sales that were made for more, as the average is up to $33 overall, which is a 38% jump, which again, that's some green, which you think it would, maybe make it enough to kind of make the bottom of the list there. But realistically, when I look, there's only been one sale since Tuesday of this week. So this seems like after last weekend, the momentum has kind of died on Powers #1 for now. We'll see if it picks up. We get any casting news, early cell animations, things like that, teases, whatever. But for now, it seems like this rushed to the top and then has slowed down pretty quickly, despite the fact that prices are up a bit. So with that, that is the fallout from last week. So don't go anywhere. Stick around for the qualified. The boys are probably still doing their show right now. So check them out live right now. The qualified. Stick around. Come back tomorrow for Saturday night special. I know it's Easter weekend, so we'll see. Some shows might be moved around. I think Star Wars might be holding off on not doing one on Easter Sunday. So the boys, I think, might be holding off until next week to also talk about the new Mall show, which should be dropping, I think, on Monday. So we might see Tales from the Dark Side going live, I think, possibly on Tuesday of next week. Haven't finalized times on anything yet, so that's why I'm not giving a formal announcement, but giving you all kind of a heads up that the Star Wars show will be shifted at least for this weekend. So with that, I will have more content coming your way, but it is Easter weekend this weekend. So have a happy Easter, spend some time with family and friends. And I'm going to try to get some more shows done. We'll have the watch list hopefully done for you on Monday, and then we'll see where we go from there, because I got a bunch of stuff still planned. It's just a matter of finding that time to do it. So with that all said, I'll see you all later with some more content. All right. Bye.